You did a very good job emphasizing that I need to be quick.
I wish we could have at least 2 more hours on this, but we'd
We
love to
could
get
all
into that.
talk. We could talk endlessly about this. Thank you to
Yes.
Taufik, and thank you to all of the panelists. Truly, this is an enormously challenging question, and it's heartening that even after so many decades of what I can frankly call disaster, that there remain so many people both inside the country and outside the country passionate about trying to restore the Lebanon that should be, as opposed to the Lebanon that is. You asked me this inside outside question, and I think it's a very important one. You know, um, eh, if I can be courteous to our Lebanese friends who are on this call, part of the problem is that Lebanese don't want to take enough onto themselves. Even before the existence of Hezbollah, we had a series of powers over the years who were there, but remember, they were always invited. And it is that conflict, that internal conflict, and the desire on the part of various Lebanese groups, subgroups, sects, tribes, families, regions, you name it, to look outside for support that has so undermined the system. We can pick the national compact, we can pick the electoral law, we can blame the president, the prime minister, the speaker, Hezbollah. We can blame all of them, and while that's very satisfying to say, it doesn't actually do very much. So why is Hezbollah there? Hezbollah is there because it can be. Hezbollah is there because the Iranian government took an opportunity through because of the conflict on the ground, because of the general disenfranchised feeling of southern Lebanon and of Lebanon's Shiites, and they turned that opportunity into what I would call the most, and have repeatedly called, the most powerful terrorist organization in the world. This is not a terrorist organization, this is a terrorist army, right? Extraordinarily well supplied, extraordinarily domineering in terms of its own weapons, but also an integral part of what people like to call the fabric of Lebanon. How do you unthread that fabric? How do the Lebanese people on the one side, and the United States and the French and your friends, and when I say your friends, I don't mean the people who come and help you fight against your internal enemies, but your actual friends, your national friends, how do they do anything? Honestly, for me, having worked on this for many, many years, more than I care to admit, I would say that the answer is no longer within Lebanon. People like to say it's a failed state. People like to say, if only we could deal with the corruption. But the answer is that, in fact, these problems are now woven into everything that there is in Lebanon. You can't have electricity without corruption. Okay? You can't have garbage collection without corruption. I'm not talking about power here. I'm not talking about the central bank. I'm talking about rubbish. Okay? When you get to that kind of a state, you really are looking at a situation that requires dramatic change. And it seems to me that that change, unfortunately, needs to begin not inside Lebanon, but outside. It needs to begin with the influence that outside parties, particularly Iran, but also to a certain extent Syria, and to a more limited extent Israel, play in Lebanon. Unless we are able to do something, most importantly, about the role that Iran plays in the region, there is no hope for this country. There is no hope. And I say that understanding that this is one of the most intellectually rich, most diverse, in many ways most secular, and most respectful of religious differences community that exists in the Middle East. Nonetheless, what we have had over the last 30 years is a situation in which Lebanon, the model, has proliferated. So Lebanon is not Lebanon by itself. Lebanon is Yemen, right? Lebanon is Iraq. Lebanon is Syria. This is the model that Iran imposes. It is to have a dominating political party from a sympathetic secular religious group, and a military power that exists alongside, but also a destabilization. All of you who are nerds like me know what the expression Lebanonization means, and it is not a compliment. Okay? The responsibility here is with Iran. And I'm not going to sit here and turn this into an Iran event because it's not. But I think we cannot lie to ourselves in suggesting that somehow, if there is some magical fix inside Lebanon, things will go away. They won't, because there is no magical fix. You know, one of the things that I've talked about, and I'm going to wrap up. I can see Mr. Shaheen sort of looking at me with his beady eyes from back there. But one of the things that we've talked about, for example, is the importance of having a law inside Lebanon that forbids outside money from coming into the country in order to influence political parties. Okay, that law already exists. The problem is not the laws. The problem is enforcement of the laws. Okay? The problem is not the political system. It's the people who are within the political system. And, you know, if we look at the recent crises and we look at the frustration of the Lebanese people as they stood up. Sorry, I just saw one of the questions.
You like that, didn't you?
I was like, wow, well, sorry. You can ask me that in the Q&A, Pauline. But look, if we look at all of those people who stood up, who came out to demonstrate during what you can call the beginning of a second Arab Spring in some ways, because it happened also in Iraq, it happened also in Sudan, it happened also in Iran, it happened elsewhere. What do we say? What was the result of that? Is there a single person on my panel or in the group who can tell me that that was transformative in terms of what resulted? And we can't just put it on COVID. It's not just COVID. It was not transformative. And that is because the players are not there in order to affect the changes that are necessary. And I wish I had something more cheerful to say to everybody, because Lebanon is worth the fight. It really is. The problem is, I'm not quite sure that the solution lies within any longer.
Thank you, Ms.